All right, so here we are with Coach James O'Brien from Lebanon Valley College, class of 2007, right?
Correct. Yes.
So James, tell us about you as a student. What did you study? What things were your passions?
Sure. So, like Dr. Hinshaw said, graduated in '07. Graduated again from LVC in 2015. So I have two LVC graduates. As an undergrad, I was a political science major. I had a history minor and a law and society minor as well. Always was dead set on going to law school, wanted to be a lawyer for as long as I could remember, back to early high school. Went to law school for a year, found it just was completely not what I expected. I've always been a pretty determined person, but early on in that experience, I could just tell, like deep in my being, it was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I actually stopped going to law school after a year and had to kind of wrestle with that and figure out what I wanted to do. Now, as a student at LVC, I ran cross country all 4 years. I did track and field. I always loved learning like the whys and the hows behind the scenes. So often I just kind of caught myself reading books in college about running, about the science of running, things like that, just totally on my own. But since I was captain for 3 years at LVC, I kind of stumbled into a part-time position as the cross-country coach right out of school. So that next year, I was young, and they hired me as a part-time head coach for cross-country. And at that time, I don't know if I thought I would still be here, I guess 14 years later, 13, 14 years later. But the position has kind of grown to match my growth in the profession. So I've been full-time for the last eight to 9 years. Really love coaching at LVC. So I had that little mini break for that 1 year, but I've been at LVC for about 18, 19 years continuous now. It goes very quickly.
Yeah, I just realized while you were talking that you are living the dream that many of the secondary ed students have, which is graduate from college and then come back to LVC and work there and teach classes and all the rest. And I realized but if you would have tried to do that, you wouldn't have done
For sure.
what you did.
Yes.
And even though now you actually are, right, you've taught some
Yep,
some
I teach
classes.
a companion course for the last 5 years. I've done some other things too. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about your job. Like today, what are you doing? And then maybe talk about how that job grew.
Absolutely. So, today my main job is recruiting, retaining, and helping to grow the young people that run cross country and track and field at LVC. There's a lot that goes into that I feel like people don't necessarily understand. Maybe, when you think about coaching and you think about, if you don't have any experience with it, you kind of equate it to what you see on television or movies. Most of coaching is not glamorous. There's a lot of paperwork and things that we're doing and planning. The fun part is about maybe 20% of what we do, getting to interact with our student athletes and help them work through things. But there's just so much that keeps us busy on a daily basis, mostly from a planning perspective, but also from kind of capturing on the tail end and reflecting on things as well. My LVC education as an undergrad, I didn't realize how well it prepared me for what I do now. So as a coach, a lot, especially in running, a lot of it is working with the individual to help them grow to be the best runner they can be. There's so many different ways that you can coach. There's different mileage approaches, different types of workouts, so many different things. So I'm very big on collecting data. I have my athletes fill out very extensive logs for me. I use that to help with future decision making. I can also kind of capture if something goes really well for a student athlete over maybe a 6-month block. I might try to replicate something similar in the future, but they provide a lot of the input. So I want to know how they're feeling. I try to engage them in the process. So I'm more of guiding them as opposed to dictating exactly what they do. We're kind of working together to come up with the best plan, especially for my more engaged athletes. But having data is one thing, and studying history, right? There's so many different things you can read, and honestly, you might put 2 books next to each other, and they might have completely opposite viewpoints, right? So you read this one thing, and you think one thing, and you read another thing, it's the complete opposite, right? Being able to effectively navigate through different texts, different conflicting opinions, to form your own authentic opinion is so important. And in the running world, it's no different. There's always new science coming out on different ways to coach, different ways to train athletes as runners, but also in a broader spectrum. So being able to navigate through new information, figuring out if it's valid to what you're doing, applicable, not applicable, is something I literally do every single day. I spend time reading things online, books, whatnot, to try to make sure I'm honing my craft as best as possible. And that's something I assuredly learned through political science and history, is just, here's all of this information. How can I find what I think is meaningful to me? How can I be open to new ideas? But just because something's new and is maybe hot or trendy doesn't mean it's a good idea either. Sometimes you want to sit on something for a little bit before you think it might be a good idea. So just kind of navigating all that swirling information is really important in a lot of different jobs, but I found it in particular important for myself and my coaching career.
And don't you do a lot with video
Yes,
information,
yep.
and which is another way of kind of distilling stories or distilling information and
Absolutely.
present it.
So I love
Present it.
kind of one of my hobbies that I've turned into something that helps the athletic department. I would do a lot of video work for LVC athletics and for my team in particular. No undergraduate experience, no camera experience, but I taught myself through a lot of reading and just trial and error. How to make some pretty decent videos, how to capture sound appropriately, how to capture video, how to edit. I love editing. That's my favorite part of the process. I even now get roped into helping the LVC, helping the Anvil Library do promotional videos. I did the local park last summer, maybe 2 summers ago. Helped them put together a promotional video at Union Canal Tunnel Park. So, finding ways that can help build out your career. So that was something I just did on my own early on before I was full-time. And then positions got created for me to make my job full-time, but I also had expectations to help do video work to help other teams in our athletic department. So finding time on your own to kind of, find things that you might be good at, figuring out if you are good at it, and then not being afraid to just employ that in your profession. Because oftentimes if it can bring value to others, it's going to be appreciated for sure. And I'm very proud of some of the work that I've done for LVC Athletics. We did an It's on Us campaign a couple of years ago, and that video was very well received on campus. And just proud to work with those student athletes, just about creating culture of change and being respectful of others and looking out for others. So anytime I can use skills that I've developed to help, I'm ready to jump on that, whether it's for a library campaign or anything else. Anytime you think you can develop a skill, don't question it. Just if you have the time to do it, try to develop it. You don't know if it can help you out in your future.
So how is the MBA? How is the MBA
So,
different than say an undergraduate degree?
Yeah. So I honestly just did my MBA because as a full-time employee, it was free, and I had been out of doing classroom-related things for enough that I just kind of wanted a different challenge to help my brain stay sharp and think. I loved it. Some of the courses were right up my alley in terms of marketing and things like that I always enjoy, because coaching is also selling, right? Selling your ideas, selling your program to get people to want to come and compete for you. So there's a lot of interesting things there. Some of the classes were incredibly difficult. Some of the math classes that I had not prepared well for undergrad because I didn't take any courses relevant. And I learned a lot about myself working through classes that I did not have the background for, and I literally had to teach myself the background and then that next level step to get through the course. And I did well in those courses too, because I had high expectations for what I wanted to get out of the classes. Just kind of putting myself through a different challenge. I think that's valuable to do every so often in your life. I wouldn't want to do that every 3 years, like start a new program. You need to kind of go all in on something and then maybe relent a little bit and allow yourself to process. If you're always struggling through things, I don't know if that's always healthy, but I think every so often it's good to get out of your comfort zone, just to try new things and see where just to kind of see yourself continue to develop, because it's very easy to get complacent. People, you get stuck in your normal routine. You get up, you go to work, you do your thing. Maybe you have certain activities you do, but years can go by like that if you don't ever change it up and try different things. And you don't want all those years to slip away before you realize that there was more things you wanted to do in your life. So anytime you have the opportunity to put yourself out there. And the MBA for me was just kind of a great opportunity.
Mhm.
I tell my student athletes, I'm like, I did it for fun. I definitely learned some things that were applicable to my job, and also helped me see things from different angles that I didn't understand before. But by and large, I did it just for fun because I could.
Right, and you could, I mean, you have to have some idea, like if you ever need to shift jobs, that should help you
Yep.
be marketable. And
For sure.
So.
Yeah, but that's what I always tell. They're like, "Oh, you have your MBA. What are you gonna do now?" I'm like, "No, I'm gonna keep coaching, and I have my MBA." And yeah.
Okay, so so what do cross country coaches make, give or take? Do you?
Yeah,
is
it depends. It depends for sure. Probably low end of what teachers make.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a nice job flexibility too. So for instance, for me, over the summer, I have such great job flexibility. Nobody literally cares when I walk in or walk out
Mm-hmm.
of my office on a daily basis. But I was just, before I came here for this interview, I was just on the phone with somebody for an hour on a Sunday too. You don't ever really get to turn it off, but you can always kind of push pause too.
Right.
We were on vacation in Puerto Rico. My wife and I and our daughters were on vacation. I had a student athlete, one of my better student athletes, just had a bevy of bad workouts in a row, and was like questioning his confidence levels and stuff. And this is, we're like out to eat at a nice restaurant, but I don't want to leave him hanging too. So there's this emotional part of the job that is really awesome, but also is it's hard to ever like kind of flip the light switch. So maybe certain jobs you can leave at the end of the day, flip
Right.
the light switch, and your brain, you go do you. For me, I always feel like I'm loosely in charge of the people that are under me and working with me. So maybe the pay isn't amazing, but the job flexibility is really good for sure. And there are times where I'm working 70, 80 hours a week, and there's times like that again nobody literally cares as long as you're doing and accomplishing the things that you need to. So there's nobody like writing when you show up in the morning or anything like that or leaving, but you also have to get done the things you want to do if you want to be successful and if you want to stay around too. Because if you keep doing a bad job at something, it's also a profession that's easy to get pushed out of pretty
Right.
quickly too.
So as I recall, you have a slightly different theory of your team, like runners can stay on the team as long as they're like, and I realize as I tried to formulate this question that it's about basically not being solely for themselves. Like, are they?
Yeah.
If they're
Yes.
as long as they're
Yep.
participating, as long as they're
Correct.
as
Yeah,
long as
so-
they're giving it their all.
Absolutely. So when I'm recruiting high school athletes, I of course have a certain caliber that I'm looking for that are going to help our team from an athletic standpoint to be successful. But those aren't the only tangible things that make a team successful. So when I meet with people or if I'm talking with somebody, I tell them the two things I'm looking for. I want people that are willing to put in the work to improve, and I want people that care about each other, right? We've had some incredibly impactful student athletes on our team over the years that might not be that athletically gifted, but they have just the right mentality or they know the right thing to say to others. So we have a very inclusive environment. We have I have a young lady that I believe should be going back to nationals again this fall. She went 2 years ago the last time we had cross country. She just won 2 conference events in the spring. And I have some developmental people coming out. But I want to afford people, especially Division III, the opportunity to learn about themselves, to learn how to work with different people. A lot of times, confidence is a tough thing, especially for young ladies when they're 18. Sport is a very safe environment where we can push our boundaries, figure out who we are, without really a feel of real failure, right? At the end of the day, whether you run a certain race well or not, it's not likely to change your life trajectory, right? But learning how to cope with something that goes wrong is really important. Learning how to push yourself for things that might seem outside of your reach is really important. We spend a lot of time teaching these things to our student athletes on the team to help them, navigate the ups and downs of life that they will experience after they graduate. And, this gives them a real safe environment with people that care about them, see them 6 to 7 days a week for 4 years straight, to develop some real deep relationships with them, and obviously want to see them be successful after they graduate.
Yeah, and I know you've had real tremendous success with your team. I mean, that was always a team that was like, we got a cross country team, and they're nothing. right? And
Yeah.
now it's no longer that. I mean, you've got really, you know, people going to nationals is a big deal, and that's fairly routine.
Yes.
With you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really.
knock on wood.
But that's I love. I mean, it is one of the other hats. One of the other things I learned while I was at LVC and kind of got interested in was how evolution and history interact. And so a lot of what you're describing is group selection. So, you know, like animals that are weak necessarily, you know, it's a different survival strategy, but groups can survive. Like herds survive in part by
Yeah.
cooperating, and you know, it's a lot of how humans have survived.
Mm-hmm.
Is we have tremendous levels of cooperation. So rather than, and I think it's great because usually you would think, oh, you know, it's all about the individual and it's all about them just kind of beating everybody else. And I think that's a more humane approach because people really do have a deep need to be
Mm-hmm.
part of something.
Absolutely.
So what kinds of advice? Well, I guess, sorry, let me ask you a different question than advice. If you were to go back
Yeah.
and talk to your 18-year-old self,
Oh goodness.
besides, definitely be nicer to Kelly.
Yeah.
But what kinds of things would you do differently yourself if you could?
You know, I don't know. I think one of the things that was really important for me, especially in college, was learning just how to get yourself outside of your comfort zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was very shy in high school, relatively quiet. I worked hard at the things I did, especially running related, school. I think you could always work a little harder in high school unless you're just like always on, like just sitting in front of the books, you know. So I think I developed a good work ethic in college, which was great. But I also would say in the 4 years that you're there, like I literally hated public speaking. I was the person that if I had to give a speech in class, even throughout most of college, the whole day before, like my stomach would be upset, I'd feel awful. But being a coach, like I feel so comfortable talking in front of groups of 40. Still, if it's a couple hundred people, I'm gonna feel nervous, right? But I feel way more confident now than I did before. So I would say, you know, if I could give advice to myself, would be to reiterate, and maybe even earlier, is focus on what some of your weaknesses are that will be prevalent in your future job, right? So I didn't know what my future job would be, but if I was a lawyer, I'd still have to be comfortable speaking in front of large groups of people about important things. So if you have a certain profession you're intending to do, you know, figure out the things that you do well. You're like, yep, I'm good with that, or I can continue to develop that skill. But figure out things that you're not good at yet, that you know you will need to be effective in your job, and start seeking out opportunities to develop that, whether that's going to certain conferences, working with professors that you know are good at that thing, or just have an interest in you. But try to get yourself out of your comfort zone, because the more you do that thing that you're not good at, you're going to help refine your craft. And you don't need to develop all of your weaknesses. There's no such thing as the perfect person out there, right? But knowing the things that you will need to be confident at in the future is something I wish I really recognized when I was 18, 19, and just more quickly devoted time to. Because especially in the job, whatever your job market is, but within history, you're going to be a teacher. You know, there's only so many positions out there each year for what it is. Most likely, most of you aren't going to be, you know, looking for college coaching. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But whatever your job is, if you can seem really polished at 21, 22, right? If you're equal to somebody else on paper, your resumes are the same. If you come in and you're confident, you know, it's going to speak more highly. Which is something that my wife, Kelly, who you might see this video before or after, but she's in one of the other videos, and she was always more confident and outgoing, and definitely helped me with some of that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's on you to learn the things that you need to do well. And I would, you know, college, there's so many things going on at all times that you need to, it's not all going to happen just in the classroom, you know, it can happen in different ways. So making sure that you're open to opportunities and not just, again, in your normal routine, doing the things you do each day, going to the same classes. Go to those speakers, you know, when they bring them on campus. You don't know what they're going to talk about that might, you know, be a light bulb moment for you. So just making sure you're open to taking advantage of the opportunities that kind of come to campus. That was something I think we did a decent job of in college, is going to speakers, and we even would drive to some other colleges on occasion. I think probably the most impactful speaker is I'm gonna mess up the name here, but Paul Rusesabagina. who was in the Hotel Rwanda movie with Don Cheadle. He spoke over at Penn State Harrisburg, and I remember we crammed a couple of cars together and drove over there, and just hearing that tale was just so eye-opening for somebody like myself to hear at that age. So just making sure that you take in others' perspectives and different opportunities to grow as a person, whether that's going to impact your skill set or not.
That's awesome advice. I mean, especially even if you knew you were going to inherit $100 million, that's great advice. I mean, so it can be de-linked from having a job. So what, besides that, do you have any advice for the listening audience?
No, it's going to go by so quick, so just try to enjoy your experience as quickly, as much as you can during the 4 to 6 years or whatever you're at, obviously. Not meant that you're held back, meant if you have your master's or doctorate.
Or they could switch and become a physical therapist.
You never know, right?
Right.
So,
hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet, but there's always a first for everything, right? So, just make sure you enjoy your experience as much as possible, because it'll go by very quickly. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.